Welcome, we're 37G. I'm William Garrison.
And I'm Michael Aune.
We're here today to talk to you about Magic the Gathering. There's a new Magic the Gathering set that's coming out that's called Dragon's Maze. I put up a few spoilers as Wizards of the Coast and other retailers and such have been releasing some of the cards that are coming out in the set. Wizards of the Coast officially released the entire set last night, and so we have the entire set to talk about and sort of go over what we think about the cards today. So,
starting at number 1, which is Boros Mastiff, which is a white 2/2 for 1 colorless, 1 white. Battalions for lifelink. I don't know. Pretty run-of-the-mill to me. Nothing.
He kind of reminds me of a Johnny Sunstriker from M12, the 2/2 for 2 white, so white. The only difference is he had lifelink by default. Boros Mastiff is a little bit easier to play in multicolor decks, whereas a Johnny Sunstriker, if you were playing 2 or 3 colors, you got in that weird thing where you couldn't always play him on turn 2.
No. I actually see him being a decent pick for Orzhov with the lifelink, potentially. Yeah. I mean, he's a bear with a bonus. He's going to be. Yeah. He's going to see a lot of late pick play.
Yeah,
I think
won't see any sort of constructed play, but he's pretty good in limited, and most bears are good in limited in general. So
yeah. After that, it's Haazda or Haazda Snare Squad.
I think Haazda Snare Squad.
Yeah, I think you are correct there. So that's 2 colorless and a white for a 1/4, and whenever he attacks, you can pay one white, and if you do, you can tap target creature an opponent controls, which is probably going to be way more useful for Boros than Orzhov in this set. I don't see Selesnya needing it.
It reads as another
maybe Azorius.
It reads as another battalion enabler. And he kind of reminds me of Gideon's Lawkeeper, the 1/1. You pay 1. You tap him. The problem is you couldn't attack with him. The fact that he has a 1/4 butt means you're usually not afraid to attack with him, and you're going to tap down their biggest guy or their defender, or basically whatever's worth it to you. I think it is worth noting that basically this doesn't trigger multiple times. It only triggers for him attacking. So it's like
any paid ability that's conditional is usually only.
So unfortunately, you'd have to have multiple. But these would be amazing in multiples.
Well, and you got to remember too, if nothing else, it gives Boros something it hasn't had, which is an ass. Yeah. You have a blocker on turn 3 if you're losing the race. You can actually slow down a lot of those 1/1, 2/1s, and 3/1s that Boros is notorious for having.
I think this is only good in Orzhov in the sense that he's just like...
well, Orzhov or Azorius.
Yeah.
He'll fit into Azorius nicely, too, for the same reason. You can detain some stuff. He's basically like an activated detain as well, in a sense. So I think those will be the 2 guilds that'll snag him up. But also, Orzhov's always looking for butts, so...
Yeah.
But he's strictly worse than Basilica Guards for Orzhov, so...
He's only good when you're finally ready to attack or whatever. So that takes us to Levy Decree. It's a 1 and white sorcery and detain up to 2 target creatures your opponents control.
Not too much to say about this except it will be used probably exclusively by Azorius. Maybe Orzhov for a little bit of detain. I mean, it's cheap detain. It can slow him down for a turn. It's a spell you can extort off of.
Yeah, Orzhov does like those cheap spells that you can extort. This, unfortunately, is a little bit of it's that silo card. It's really not that good unless you're going to do something. You're either detaining their creature so you can swing in or to prevent them from swinging into you. Yeah. There's that middle ground where it's like, if it really has no benefit, if they weren't going to swing in anyways because you have defenders, or because your creatures are bigger than them, or because you're deadlocked, then there are just some times in which the benefit of casting the spell just isn't that great. But at the low cost, and especially in...
I can see Boros grabbing this too, to let because, when you're starting to get stalled out because you got a few key blockers.
Because you can do 2, it's pretty big.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting.
Azorius, I think it's most powerful when you have flyers, just because you're going to detain if they have any flyers or reach creatures.
Yeah.
And then Boros, like you said, it's great because it allows you to tap down the things that you would not be able to profitably attack into in order to get Battalion going.
So it'll be a good utility card. It'll be interesting to see how it plays, but I don't predict anything super great. But I also see it winning people games. Yep. Basically, every once in a while it's going to be the 2 that you need, and you're going to pull it off.
Yep, totally.
Which brings us to Maze Sentinel, which is a 5 and a white, vigilance, 3/6, and gives multicolored creatures you control vigilance. It's part of a maze insert name here, cycle that they did, and
yeah, there's one for each color.
They're really expensive, so he'll probably see use in Orzhov, maybe Azorius, but outside of that, I don't really see him being something practically useful in limited, not playable at all in any other format.
Yeah,
it's just too pricey.
Going over the set review, there's a thing, and I don't even know if you've heard about it before. It's called the Jace test, and what they do is you compare a creature to if it would be able to outlive or do something and have immediate impact to the board. Because the problem with the old Jace, his I think it's -1 his unsummon ability. It's like if you just put a 2/2 bear into play, that Jace unsummons him. You paid mana to do nothing essentially.
Yeah.
And so that's why cards like Thragtusk, Restoration Angel, it's like anytime you look at a creature to see if it's viable and constructed in Standard mainly, it really has to do something almost immediately.
Yeah.
Or have some kind of extra ability. For example, Gore-Clan Rampager is a card that has seen play in Standard. He's just a 4/4 trampler on its face for 4, which is good. But the fact that he has an uncounterable discard ability is pretty strong.
Which fits its...
So unfortunately, these Maze cards, like this Maze Sentinel, he doesn't have enough effect when things come into play.
If it was lifelink, I'd be more intrigued.
Or if it was all creatures you control have vigilance, that might be a slight uptick to make it at least stronger and limited. I don't even know if that'd be enough to get it in Standard, but the fact that it has to be
too expensive for Standard.
The fact that it has to be multicolored creatures. Yeah, when you had cards like the Titans, it's hard to put a 6 mana creature in Standard currently and not compare it to the Titans, because the Titans were pretty recent.
Yeah.
And this is nowhere near a Titan. So luckily they're common, which means you'll see them more in limited. And like you said, they're playable in limited. You definitely don't want to fill your deck with them.
No.
Like,
if you need a big ass and you need that 23rd card, go for it. But that's about it. Which brings us to Renounce the Guilds. 1 colorless, 1 white, instant. Each player sacrifices a multicolored permanent. This, I feel, was printed for Planeswalkers. That's really what I feel that this card is nasty for long term, because a lot of people, that's going to be their big thing, is some of the fun Planeswalkers. Right now in Standard meta, you've got, as you pointed out, Falcon Wrath Aristocrat,
Geist of Saint Traft, which has hexproof, which is already hard to deal with. Yeah. Falcon Wrath is just hard to deal with because of the indestructibility.
So there's those to me seem to be the two. It's like after 5 or 6 creatures, or the Planeswalkers that are popular.
The fact that this is a low cost instant means it's already interesting. It's an edict, but for multicolored permanents, which is interesting because usually this will be in the sideboard and you will play around it. Like, basically, you'll wait to play it in a position where you don't care about losing your multicolored permanent if you have one, but your opponent has to sack their Geist of Saint Traft, which they put a Rancor on or something.
Yep.
So they're losing value, and you've only paid 2 mana and an instant for it.
Yeah.
So it'll see play. I can guarantee you it'll almost only see sideboard play.
Yeah. Now we're at Riot Control. 2 colorless and a white. Instant. You gain 1 life for each creature your opponent's control. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to you this turn. This reminds me a lot of whatever that green one was from, I think, Scar's Block.
Yeah, Steven used to play with it in his Turbo Fog deck.
It's going to find use in Turbo Fog decks. It's just so conditional.
What's interesting is it's slightly better than a Fog because it's prevent all damage that would be dealt to you this turn.
Yeah.
So they can't lightning or the new War Leader's Helix you in response, or they can do it in response to this, but they can't do it later on in the turn or after they draw if you're doing it during their upkeep or something.
Yeah.
So it's that slight verbiage change that it'll see random play in those turbo fog decks, like you said.
Like, maybe Orzhov. I would not pick that almost ever. This brings us to Zion of Vitu-Ghazi, which is 3 and 2 white. When Zion of Vitu-Ghazi enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, put a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying onto the battlefield, then populate. I mean, yeah, if you like Selesnya at all, you pick this high.
Here's the thing: it's 5 mana for a 4/4. Even if it was just that,
it's for a 4/4 and a 1/1.
No. I'm saying before any of the text on the card.
Oh, okay, yeah.
5 mana for a 4/4 is almost playable in limited, just depending on when you need the body.
When you need a body.
The fact that it spits out a 1/1 bird, awesome. That makes up the 5 power and 1 of it flying, which is good.
Yeah.
But then the fact that you can populate, depending on if you have a Centaur token, if you have that new Voice of the Resurgence token, like whatever token you have in play, you're going to be able to populate, is pretty amazing. And the fact that this is a 4/4 body with eyes in the skies printed on top of it, it's highly playable. It may even see standard play. Like this beats the Jace test, and it pairs with Restoration Angel while that still sees play in standard before that rotates out. You know, those green-white mid-range decks that sometimes still play tokens anyways.
Yep.
That populate is just going to be so valuable if you're getting an extra 5/5 out of it, or a 3/3 or whatever you populate. So it's pretty powerful.
I agree. And now we're at Steeple Rock, which is 4 colorless and a white for a flying first strike 3/1. Don't probably pick this, is my opinion. It's 1 too expensive and it's way too easy to kill. I don't know. It's not bad. It's a flyer, so if you're going the flying route, cool, but it's so pricey. When you just compare it to the 5-drop we just talked about, there's just no comparison. This
same card, I forget the specific name, but you've seen it as cheap as 1 white for a flying first strike 2/3.
Yeah.
It's just way overpriced.
Well, I think it was just a 2/3, but either way, that 2/3 is way more useful long term than a 3/1 flying first strike.
This from an older set, like nothing we've drafted. I'm just there have been way more cheap common.
Or you get the
flyers.
Granted it's uncommon, but you get the it's the 3/1.
Liev Sky Knight?
Yeah. A 3/1 that detains and is flying. I mean, for 3, you do that. Obviously, you would, given the choice, but no. Late pick. And even then, I would probably try and pick something else.
Totally.
Which sort of reminds me of the Sunspire Gate... All the Gatekeepers, I should say.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to play a heavy gate deck, like you have 2, 3, 4, I mean... You're talking about a 2/4 with an enter the battlefield ability that's dependent on you having 2 or more gates.
Yeah,
in which case you get a 2/2 token.
Yeah.
And he costs 3 and a white. That's... Okay, if he was... Here's the problem. If they made him any cheaper, he'd be too good, basically, if his thing triggered. He'd be like a rare.
Yeah.
Easily. And he'd still be good at a 2/4, but that 1 extra mana and the conditional nature of his enter the battlefield. I mean, if you already have the gates and you're thinking about playing him, cool. Otherwise, that's his only use.
What I do like is they're all splashable, if I'm not mistaken. So in this case, he only has 1 white in his cost.
I think they're all 4 cost. I think they're all just 1 of the main color.
The fact you basically have to assume that you will never trigger that ability. That's how I evaluate cards.
Yeah. You have to assume the worst case scenario.
In fact, Paulo Vito de Ram. I always forget his name. Anyways, Paulo.
Sad face.
He's a professional Magic player from Brazil. He wrote a recent article about best case scenario. But yeah, you have to assume that you're just paying 4 mana for a 2/4, which
because you're dependent on 2 other cards. This is like a Johnny combo, and yet it's just a card. I mean, there's nothing crazy you get out of it except for an extra 2/2.
So if you happen to cram a lot of gates and this is a very late
cramming
pick.
Gates, then these guys are for you.
They're gonna keep those gates.
Cram those gates. I think that's all. I think that's all any of these will probably get. As far as
I'd agree.
Anyway, Wake the Reflections. Next one up. Single white sorcery populate. to me, there's just so many better cards that combo into populate in Selesnya already. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, the problem is, this is the only one, and I've played the sets enough, this is the only one that doesn't have some other overarching ability.
That's what I mean.
One of them is prevent all combat damage, populate. Create a 1/1 token, populate. Creatures you control are indestructible until end of turn, populate. Yeah. They have other benefits. The populate was just icing on the cake. This is icing, but there's no cake. Yep. And usually I don't like to eat my icing without cake. And unfortunately...
You might be wrong, but I'm inclined to agree.
It's that worst case scenario. If you have this card in your hand but no tokens to populate, it is useless. Yep. It is a dead card, and you should play something else.
Yeah. Which brings me to one of my favorite ones, because it's just Morphling Reborn.
I'm excited about it.
Aetherling, which is... we're into blue now, so crazy shenanigans. It's 4 and 2 blue, and you get a 4/5 Shapeshifter with 4 abilities. You can pay 1 blue to exile it, and then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So you can basically keep it out of the range of removal as long as you have 1 blue open at all times.
Supreme Verdict? That's cool.
Yeah, whatever. I'm gonna get my 4/5.
My own Supreme Verdict?
Yeah.
Man.
You can pay a blue to make it unblockable this turn. Pay a colorless to give it +1/-1 until end of turn, and then pay a colorless to give it -1/+1. I mean, Morphling at 3 and 2 blue as a 3/3 could get flying, the same plus and minus abilities, and cannot remember what the 4th ability was.
Yeah, I remember.
For the life of me. All I know is
there was another interesting thing.
This is better, I think,
yes,
for staying around. It's the 1 extra mana to me is totally justified by both the abilities and the much bigger creature.
The fact that it has a bigger butt is more important, because back then you could put damage on the stack. So what people would do is you would bump up its power all the way, and then you could bump up its toughness so that when it received damage, it didn't die.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit less, but what it means by having the unblockable clause, it means that you're using it as a blocker when you need it to, or you're pumping it up as much as you can and going for unblockable damage.
You're talking about an 8/1 unblockable. But the next turn after you play it.
Yeah.
And if they try and remove it, you exile it. I mean, this will end game single-handedly.
This will be another win condition for Esper control decks, or just any mid-range deck that happens to play blue.
Yeah.
I think it'll go...
If they're not tapped out,
it'll go amazing in control decks because of the scenario I said. If you want a Miracle Terminus, that's fine. You exile him, you Miracle Terminus, he comes back,
yep.
you play Supreme Verdict after combat, whatever you want to do. He allows you to play your spells more effectively without losing your guy. And
well, the thing that it's just... He returns to the battlefield at the end of the next end step, not your end step, is super valuable.
Because you can do it if they try to remove it on their turn.
Exactly.
Right.
So he's back in play before anything goes down on your next turn. I mean, he's just a beast. And that's probably enough salivating over that card. So next up is Hidden Strings. It's 1 and a blue sorcery. You may untap or you may tap or untap target permanent. Then you may tap or untap another target permanent. And it does have the Cipher ability. Yes, maybe. I like it. It's kind of like Hands of Binding in a sense, in that you get that continuous value, especially if you're with Dimir and you're doing a lot of unblockable, or you got maybe Azorius and a lot of flying, things that you're going to get through consistently. So I like it. I think it's kind of like...
the other good thing is it combos very well. I was listening to LSV... or reading an article about Ral Zarek, which we'll talk about later, the new Planeswalker in this set. Untapping something like a Gilded Lotus, which already sees play in some of those. I mean,
stupid.
There are all sorts of artifacts and creatures with activated abilities that require you to tap. That pretty amazing. If nothing else, it repays for its cost, which kind of reminds me of a lot of cards from the Urza's block. Creatures that would come into play and you'd untap 5 lands, like Rewind, which actually sees play, counter target spell, untap up to 4 lands. This, if nothing else, pays for itself. But the Cipher, you'll actually want to start hitting your opponent to really get some sort of engine going where you just have tons of mana, or you're tapping down their guys, or whatever.
But I mean, it's good for Simic because a lot of that stuff's lacking trample.
Yep.
You can clear the board, Cipher it onto something. You can tap up to 4 things. I mean, that's... You can the best thing is after you Cipher, So you put on your attackers, you attack, you get through, you untap the guys that just attacked. I mean, this I see being just like Hands of Binding. If you could get enough Hands of Binding, you could just wreck decks. I see this being equally useful. I see this going hand in hand with that.
Yeah,
being nasty.
I'm pretty glad that they decided to print. At least this may be the only. I think this is the only one, if I remember correctly, that was spoiled. But a Cipher card that's actually kind of cheap, because we kind of got thrown a bunch of Cipher cards other than Hands of Binding that were almost unplayable, with the exception of like Shadows
all the time.
Yeah,
Hands of Binding.
Hands of Binding.
And it's because that.
Well, and Shadow Slice saw some decent play because it can end games if you put it on a flyer that's unblocked.
Well, yeah, but the main thing with
like
Hands of Binding is the fact that you could do it early enough that you could potentially lock down their board for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
If they were relying on a few creatures like Gruul trying to blood rush their way into it,
and if
nope, you can't use it that turn. I'm going to do it again next turn.
And in multiple Hands of Binding is just sick. So it's a similar card in that regard.
All right, enough again salivating.
Yeah.
Maze Glider, next one up. 5 colorless and a blue for a flying 3/5 that gives your multicolored creatures you control flying. I don't think we have anything extra to say except that it's too expensive. It's just like this Vigilance guy, slightly more playable because flying is obviously more useful, but
Evasion is a pretty high pick. So I would play this over the Vigilance guy. But
yeah, if you're looking for a 6-drop and it's between the two, sure.
Yeah,
that's about it. All right, Mind Static. 3 and a blue, instant, counter target spell unless its controller pays 6. It's effectively a hard counter. I mean, in almost any game you play, especially in limited.
The problem currently is just because we're in a standard format with so many better counters, this will not see any constructive play.
No, this will
I do play counters in limited, but this is strictly worse than cancel. Cancel's just counter target spell for 1 and 2, and blue.
Yeah.
But I will probably end up playing this at some point in my decks. I won't necessarily be happy about it.
You play it because you need it, not because you want it.
What I think they did with this, from a research and development standpoint, is they took Mana Leak and doubled it. So it's twice the cost, twice the effect. Because Mana Leak is 1 and a blue, counter target spell unless it's a controller plays 3. This is just a double Mana Leak, and unfortunately, Standard doesn't want a double Mana Leak, so
nope, not at all.
Dissipate is strictly better. Dissipate exiles your Lingering Souls tokens.
How about this?
Reanimator targets.
At 2, if you're looking for a 2-drop in blue, I'd much rather have Murmuring Phantasm, which is the next one up, which is an 0/5 defender for 2.
Yes.
And the reason is, if I'm in Azorius, if I'm in Simic, or if I'm in Azorius, yeah, Simic Is It, I want this card. Because you just shut down Boros. Hands down. The 0/5 will trigger Evolve in Simic. It's cheap, so you're not necessarily screwing up your curve. It just, to me, makes sense as it's fairly... I mean, it's a middling pick, but especially in draft.
It's a slightly better Kraken Hatchling, and I was more than happy to play Kraken Hatchling in M13.
It's an annoying-ass card.
Yeah.
Now we're at Opal Lake Gatekeepers, which is the next Gatekeeper in the set. It's 3 and a blue. When it enters the battlefield, if you control 2 or more gates, you may draw a card. Same reasons as before. If you're gate heavy, late picks, maybe in a draft, you go for this. I much prefer the draw card than the 2/2, to be honest. I mean, a 2/2 Vigilance just that late in the game is probably not that useful. It's a late pick for me if I'm doing it. The only Sealed, they'd be filling a spot because there's nothing else to put.
The only thing that I think redeems these cards, in Sealed especially, is just because you're essentially going to have a gate from each pack, and you've got 6 packs.
But you'll be lucky to have 2 that are on color.
Right.
Is the problem.
There's a better chance of you playing 3 colors because of the clue stones and the way the guild packs work, like with your ally guild.
Man.
So I have a feeling during the pre-release there might be... You probably 1 out of 4 decks that you'll see will probably actually be able to use these somewhat effectively. It's such a corner case that I don't think it's worth it most of the time. And like I said, you've got to think about the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Do you want to pay 4 mana for a 2/4? Not usually.
Yeah. So that brings us to Runner's Bane, 1 and a blue. Enchant creature with power 3 or less. When it comes into the battlefield, tap that target creature. Or tap enchanted creature, sorry. And then it doesn't untap its controller's untap step. It's useless against Simic, probably, so that's not the greatest. You know, it'll shut down his Aureus a little bit. Gruul is probably out of range too early. Rakdos even is usually out of range too early to make it terribly useful. So to me, it's a sideboard card. It's conditional against who you're playing. I would not main deck this probably in most situations.
Yeah, the problem is if you main deck it, you're only going to get their early drops.
Yeah, and that's the issue. Most things will grow out of it or just play out of it, and so you've wasted it early, or it ends up sitting in your hand against a threat you really need to answer for. So if you are reaching for removal or control and you absolutely have to have it, fine. Otherwise, just leave it be.
Yep.
Trait Doctoring. 1 blue, sorcery. Change the text of target permanent by replacing all instances of one color word with another or one basic land type with another until end of turn. And Cipher. This is at rare. And I think that's because they didn't want to inflict this on people more often than they had to. Because it is effectively useless and limited. There's almost nothing you can do.
Well, and I can't even think of a way that it's useful in Standard. I just can't.
The only thing I can say is if you're playing with a lot of invasion block cards that are color specific, maybe.
Yeah, it has
that
to.
is about the only thing I've been able to find.
I don't think it's limited to invasion block. There might be some corner case where it's more useful in older formats like Modern and Legacy, but unfortunately, neither of us are well versed in those formats enough to say it is.
Actually, is invasion that's not in Modern, is it?
Right, it'd just be Legacy. Yeah. But I just mean like
I was just curious.
Shadowmoor and Eventide, like that block was
Eventide.
Heavy multicolored, and Eventide, whatever. Yeah. So I hate to.
It's just so specific. Like there's, I'm sure someone in R&D has a combo in the back of their mind that will just wreck the world if it goes off.
But
it's.
Yeah. Or it's useful for decks that I'm unaware of, but yeah, unfortunately, it's you'll be beyond
my pay grade.
You'll be pretty bummed when you open this in your sealed deck because you'll have no way to use it. So.
Yeah, you will just immediately put that in your rare binder to eventually trade in for nothing. Anyway, uncovered clues. 2 and a blue sorcery. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 instant and/or sorcery cards from among them, and put the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order.
This is one I actually feel like it could see Standard play. It really depends on after rotation, because right now we just have better card draw and better filtering.
Things like Forbidden Alchemy drop out.
But control decks obviously run a lot of instants of sorceries, especially cheap instant or sorceries, and so this is typically an effective draw 2 cards. It's unfortunately, it's not an instant.
And the problem is you're looking at best case, and that's worst case. You just spent 3 mana.
Most control decks, you will most of the time, probably 60+%, you'll hit 1 instant or sorcery.
Yeah.
You're just hoping for 2, and unfortunately, draw 1, mill 3 for 3 mana isn't great.
I think it's just too. It's too dependent on your deck, and especially limited. If you're playing that many spells, you've already lost. You're gonna get blown out by a Boros deck.
I think this is entirely dependent on comboing with other cards. Like if we had a Planeswalker that did sort of a brainstorm effect where you could filter the top of your deck, or
well, I
know Dimir Charm
Reanimator in a weird way because you're fetching. You're fetching your Unburial Rights or whatever,
right?
And putting your creatures in.
Oh wait, no, it's bottom of the library. Sorry.
No, that's right. No, never mind. Ignore what I just said.
So I think the only time I don't think I'll play this much in limited. I might try it out, but
I'm going to let other people try it out for me. And I'd
have to be heavy. Is it and heavy spells and sorceries? Or heavy instants and sorceries, but otherwise. This might not see play in Standard until rotation, and then I have no idea what will happen because new sets will come out.
Rotation, yeah. Anyway, Windrake, 2 and a blue for a 2/2 flying. Yes, all day long I will take 2/2 flyings.
And this is a reprint, if I'm not mistaken. From M13?
It might not be from name. I can't remember, but if not, it is definitely the exact same creature. Yes.
Yeah. Which I was more than happy to play with there. That paying 1 extra mana for the evasion is pretty powerful. Yep. Blue-white flyers has been a deck since Magic's inception, and you'll be more than happy to fly over your opponents with this Drake. So
and then we're into black now. Bane Alley Blackguard. He is a 1/3 for 2. Pretty much no. I just don't know where he fits. He will die to too much Boros stuff in Dimir to try and slow the rush. He doesn't fit Rakdos at all, and he doesn't play into Golgarian anyway, so he's just an odd man out.
It's funny how a 2/2 is so much better than a 1/3.
Yeah.
Just in every regard. It's
shifting that one over, other than the fact that he can catch a 2/2 for a few turns. Yeah. Blood Scrivener, though, at the same cost, 1 and a black, is a zombie wizard, which is one of my favorite types of wizard. It says he's a 2/1, and if you would draw a card while you have no cards in hand, instead draw 2 cards and lose 1 life. There will be decks that will wreck with this. I just don't know what they are.
Esper Control will play this. I'm almost certain of it.
He's not meant for limited, I would say, pretty much straight up.
Yeah, I would play him. I will play him in limited, but only if I have card draw spells in the deck that I can also take some sort of advantage with him. And unfortunately, there aren't a lot.
You have to have no cards is the problem. You have to be getting rid of your cards to do the draw.
Which late game you're full of.
Yeah.
Again, he'll see more play in constructed. It's just unfortunately, unless you're playing like actual draft, which will be block, you'll be playing 1 booster of each.
Yeah.
He'll be better because there will be more targets for card draw. The card draw's better across all 3 sets. The card draw on Dragon's Maze isn't that good.
Yeah.
He'll be pretty interesting in standard. He will see play, and it'll be some interesting combos with cards like Sign in Blood, with Cycling, Azorius Charm, with whatever. You'll be okay dumping your hand when you need to, and because of cards like him. So he's pretty good.
Yep. So on to Crypt Incursion, 2 and a black for an instant that exiles all creature cards from target player's graveyard. You gain 3 life for each card exiled this way. This, to me, is solely to say, screw you, Reanimator.
Yep.
It gives Jund mid-range an answer to
I think
Reanimator that I think is a little easier to play, a little more in tempo. It's instant speed. You can play it at your leisure, sort of thing, in response to something. Or
there were already options, but the fact that they keep printing them is interesting. The fact that it gets all creature cards is cool because it completely turns off their
they're going to have to hardcast their deck, which makes
it's
their
not
deck very tough.
Some of the other instant speed removals, like the one that creates a 1/1 flyer when you exile a card, it's like you get rid of their Crater Hoof Behemoth, they just resurrect their Acidic Slime instead, or their Thragtusk, or their Restoration Angel.
Yep.
This effectively getting rid of all targets. Now, I don't know if it's strictly better than Rest in Peace, than Ground Seal, than Tormod's Crypt, the ones that actually currently see standard play.
Yeah.
But a couple of those are going to rotate out.
Yeah. This to me is just a way to keep Reanimator in check,
keep that
to make
going.
sure it's not too bad. Fatal Fumes, 3 and a black, instant. Target creature gets -4/-2 until end of turn. I mean, it's conditional removal, or it saves you a turn. I would not pick this high, but if you're desperate for something, go for it. I don't have anything else than that.
Yeah, it doesn't get rid of a lot, but it does have that, because it gives them -4/-2.
Getting rid of double block.
Double block, and or profitably single block depending on the creature size. It's usually going to remove a creature, but again, that's always one of those feel bad moments. You're like, oh, please don't also have a trick. Please don't also have a trick.
Yeah, I would not pick this above most other removal in this block for sure. On to Hired Torturer, 2 and a black, human rogue with Defender at 2/3. You can pay 3 and a black, tap him, target opponent loses 2 life, then reveals a card at random from his hand. His or her hand, excuse me. And I don't know, to me this fits into Orzhov, maybe Dimir if you're trying to slow the Boros rush. I wouldn't play it in Golgari, probably, at all. But that's because I wouldn't play Golgari at all, because I got burned every time I tried. I think William is of the opinion that the Zarichi Tiger is strictly better.
Strictly better. He does not have Defender. Gaining life is usually better than them losing life.
Well, to me, it's dependent on this. This is better against the Orzhov mirror match.
I don't think it is.
Because late game, you don't attack with Orzhov, almost ever. You're sitting there playing your Extorts, you got him low, you're trying to get there. The Zarichi was great if you could combo it with the Guild Mage or something like that, but This it's just
he
straight
combos with other stuff,
two.
but he also activates Executioner Swing. They block with their something that doesn't normally die. You Executioner Swing them in response.
Yeah.
He literally combos with nothing.
Well, I mean, you could do it in response to blocking if he was going to die that way. I mean, you could do the same combo. I mean, that's just dependent on whether you're on the attack or the block.
Yeah, I just mean you don't even have that choice. If you both have defenders on the problem with defenders is if both sides of the board have defenders, you're doing nothing.
Well, to me, and again, this is I would in the mirror match, I'd rather have torture with Orzhov,
and that
is the only situation.
And I wouldn't have him. Unless this said reveals a random card from his or her hand and discards it.
Well, but then he's broken.
He would not be broken.
That
would probably be an uncommon. For 4 mana, that's not...
But as an engine, you can keep going.
Mind Rot is 3 mana for discard 2.
Again, for the mirror match...
Instead of 1 card at random.
I'd rather have this game. But we will see during the pre-release,
yes,
perhaps. Next up, Maze Abomination, 5 and a black. He gives multicolored creatures you control Death Touch. He has Death Touch. He's probably, to me, more fun than any of the others. The blue,
yeah, him and the blue one are pretty close. If he was a 5/5 or if the blue one was a 4/4, like that level would be a little bit closer. But the fact that he profitably blocks so much and Death Touch is just good because even if they have a combat trick, unless they somehow give it first strike, you're gonna 1-for-1 them. So
flying will seal the deal if you already have it.
Right.
Death Touch completely changes the game if everything is Death Touch. So he's my favorite of the 3 so far. I will say
he looks more like a worm than an elemental. That's the only comment.
I will agree with that. Pontiff of Blight is a rare zombie cleric, 4 and 2 black, has Extort, which we all love Extort. He's a 2/7 and gives other creatures you can have Extort. That to me. Yeah, at 6-drop, 2/7, but has Extort and gives everything else Extort. Yeah, if I'm anywhere near Orzhov, I'm playing this guy. I wouldn't play him in Standard or anything, probably, but in Limited, he will probably clinch you the game within 3 turns just by being on the board.
He's just like, and an interesting note, he's just like Sublime Archangel because different instances of Extort trigger separately. So,
yeah.
Late game, you have 7 mana, you play a Smite, you can Extort it 1 billion times.
Yeah.
He can be pretty powerful. He will be an absolute limited bomb. I think the only way he would see play in Standard is just some of the crazy like Crypt Gas decks that have seen play.
Super black mana ramp is what you need to get him in play early.
And they'll usually play some other colors like for cloning effects. Those are more that's not a deck you'll see a lot of. These are decks that just people brew in their basements and actually do pretty well just because people don't expect them or don't know how their engine works until they lose a round. So
yeah,
he's pretty good.
Rakdos Drake next up, 2 and a black, flying with Unleash for a 1/2. I'm probably playing him if I'm in Rakdos. I mean, he's a flyer, nothing else. He's a Basilica Screecher for 1 extra that you can kill a Basilica Screecher with, but no Extort. So I don't know how much I like him for Orzhov. And Golgari, useless. So, I mean, maybe if you needed a target for Scavenge, but that's about it.
Well, that's in Golgari doesn't have a lot of flyers or any that I can think of. That when you pair with some of the other guilds, like he's a good and
he's a decent pick.
Rakdos didn't have a lot of flyers either. They were high cost flyers, so having a low cost flyer like this, you will usually play him as a 2/3 that can't block, which I'll be more than happy to play 3 mana for. So.
Sinister Possession, 1 black, Enchantment Aura, enchant creature. Whenever enchanted creature attacks or blocks, its controller loses 2 life. I've learned my lesson. Cards like this can be horribly obnoxious. It's a little too conditional that it's not like Tormented Lashes. What is it?
1,000 Lashes.
1,000 Lashes.
That's the problem is when you give
to be fair, it's a single drop as opposed to a 4 drop.
When you give the owner a choice, they're going to make the choice that's best for them. So when they're going to swing in with that creature, they're going to blood rush it for 1 million. So they don't care if they're taking 2.
Yeah.
And then if you have to remove it in response, well, then you're not getting the repeated effect. This card it reminds me a lot of Contaminated Ground which turns a land into a swamp, and then when they tap it, they lose 2 life. You've got to remember that you're wasting...
I've got the deck. I've got it. It's just this.
Yeah.
And then you just... on everything. So the moment they actually go to attack, they lose.
Or you fog.
Yeah. Make the turbo fog deck with this, and you'll be good. Otherwise, meh.
Yeah,
pass it up. It's like the single black that made a land a swamp. Nope.
Yeah.
Stupid card. Don't play it. Don't do it. Anyway, Ubulsar Gatekeepers, 3 and a black, 2/4, like all of them. Whenever he enters the battlefield, if you have 2 or more gates, then target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. To me, he's in between the blue card draw and the white vigilance. I mean, the white 2/2 knight, but otherwise, again, unless you're gate heavy, probably steer clear unless you really are just reaching for something at that point in your curve.
Yeah, he's usually removal if you can trigger him. You know, maybe they think they're doing a profitable block and you just, you know, post-combat main phase, but like most of them, he's just not that good.
Yeah. Anyway, on to red. First up, off for the guilds. 2 and a red sorcery. Mono-colored creatures can't block this turn. I don't know. I'm probably going to need to play this for a while and figure out if mono-colored is... if there are enough mono-colored to make this terribly viable.
This set is mostly multicolored, so this is such a corner case. It is a sideboard and limited card at best.
Yep. Clear a path. Single red sorcery. Destroy target creature with defender. I see Boros probably being the one who loves this the most because their small stuff gets chumped by Basilica guards or the what's the dude, the blue one we just talked about, Murmuring Phantasm, things like that. Again, sideboard, if you're seeing a lot of it, bring it in, but otherwise there's no way I would mainboard this.
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, for 1 red, like, it's pretty amazing if you're playing someone that has a bunch of defenders, but...
It's kind of like Smite, it's just, it's conditional. Now, Smite, though, is way better because it's instant speed, and yeah, you can totally use it against their best attack, which is a lot more threatening than a wall. Maze Rusher. Back to another Maze 6-drop. He's 5 and a red. Haste. Multicolored creatures you control have haste. He's a 6/3. The problem is, in decks to me that are running with haste creatures, he's way too late in the game. I mean, he's a 6/3. He's going to beat, but again, to me, it's just not worth the cost unless you just really need a heavy hitter on the back end of your curve.
Yeah, there's a...
like Rakdos, you've already spent everything in your hand, and it probably has haste when it hits the board anyway.
If he was first strike or something, he might be strictly better, but yeah, he's just not that good.
No.
Playable, but not that good.
Yeah. Possibility Storm, rare enchantment, 3, 2 red. This one has a lot of text, so bear with me. When a player casts a spell from his or her hand, that player exiles it, then exiles cards from the top of his or her library until he or she exiles a card that shares a card type with it. That player may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then he or she puts all cards exiled with Possibility Storm on the bottom of his or her library in a random order. No. This is like every random red card they try and print to do something potentially crazy, and the randomness factor destroys it.
Guild Feud,
and
Search
the fact
the
that
City, Conjure
it gives
Currency.
your opponent probably the first chance to make this awesome, because if you're dropping 5 mana on this, you're probably not playing another spell that turn. Or nothing crazy, maybe, but I mean, that's late game. So that means your opponent basically gets the first chance to try and just whip out, you know, trade their 2/2 for a 5/5 or whatever it's going to be. And that...
yeah, there's a term for these spells that have a global effect where they affect you and your opponent. And this one, unfortunately, affects your opponent first positively, or theoretically positively, and that's a bad thing. Cards like Tanglewire, they affect your opponent negatively before they affect you negatively.
They affect them one more time than they affect you.
Right. So, unfortunately, this just goes in the wrong direction, and I generally don't want to give my opponent the benefit of my spells.
Yeah. Next up, Punish the Enemy. 4 and a red, instant. Punish the Enemy deals 3 damage to target creature and 3 damage to target player. Yes, I will play this. Simple as that. It's a little pricey, but double effect. You could possibly go for the kill shot, or if nothing else, take out a decently sized creature. And in red, you're always looking for burn, so I don't see why that's...
yeah, and removal in limited can sometimes be a little bit scarce. It's a little bit scarce in this set, so it's usually higher picked even if it's expensive. Angelic Edict from Gate Crash. I don't enjoy playing it, but I will more than happily pick it because I need to get creatures out of there sometimes. So.
Yeah. Pyrewild Shaman. This is probably my favorite strict red card they printed. 2 in a red. He's got Blood Rush for 1 in a red. Discard him. Target creature gets +3/+1 until end of turn. But the best bit is that whenever 1 or more of your creatures deals combat damage to a player, if Pyrewild Shaman is in your graveyard, you may pay 3 colorless, and you get to return him to your hand. He's reusable, uncounterable buffing. That will wreck people, I think, in Limited for sure, and I could actually see people trying to find a home from him in Goblin decks and stuff, because you're doing rushing. You keep blood rushing for the extra oomph, keeps coming back to your hand when you got the mana to sink late game.
Yeah, I think he's a bit expensive for older formats, his ability, but I don't know enough about older formats. I've only watched people playing stuff, but he'll be fun to play with for sure.
Yep. Next up, another Goblin, Riot Piker, 1 in a red, 2/1 first strike, but attacks each turn if able. To me, if I see attacks each turn if able on a card, it's probably unplayable because you're going to end up losing it really fast. I mean, this guy, by the time he tries to attack on turn 3, is swinging into a Basilica guard or something like that, and you just wasted 2 mana on a creature that did nothing. And first strike is not enough to salvage it. I'd rather have a 2/2 for 2 that attacks each turn if able. But at that point, again, if you turn 3, turn 4, he's dead, and he hasn't gained you anything. So, don't see a spot for him.
Maybe in Gruul, you have to have a deck with a lot of Blood Rush, but
they're just better targets at 2. I mean, the first strike's useful, I think, but I cannot see myself picking this very high at all. I would really need low drops.
Well, not saying that he's necessarily a high pick, but people already in Gate Crash Limited, they do that once, like, I don't know if I should block if they know you're playing Gruul.
Yeah.
Because Gruul always has the Blood Rush answers, but the fact that he has first strike means if you have the Blood Rush, you will always win.
No, I mean,
and
he could be good.
He usually won't get blocked. If players play the format enough, he usually won't get blocked because people expect the trick.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I'll get blown out by him and I'll change my opinion. But for me, unless I
will play him in my Gruul decks. I'll probably only play 1.
Yeah. And to me, he's filling my 2-drop spot when I haven't picked something better or that I appreciate more. But he's playable, so that's something.
Yeah.
Rumble Belt Maka, 3 in a red. Blood Rush Cat, 3/3. You can discard him for a red. Target creature gets +3/+3, and target attack creature gets +3/+3 till end of turn. He's not quite as good as Slaughterhorn. Straight up. Simple as that.
No, and
I mean, I'll put him in a Blood Rush deck because I want all the Blood Rush I can get. But I'd first pack, first pick. If these could be together, I'd be taking the Slaughterhorn.
And he has the side effect that if you're playing straight Boros, he's useful because he's a red giant growth.
He does give Boros something which they haven't had, which is buffing. He lets that critical creature survive a battalion maybe that they couldn't otherwise. And the single cost, I mean, he's got value. It's just in Gruul there is better value.
Yeah. So I'll probably play him more if I'm going straight Boros than if I'm doing the whole Boros Gruul mix.
Next up, another Gatekeeper, Smelt Ward Gatekeeper, 3 in a red, 2/4. When it enters the battlefield, if you have 2 or more gates, gain control of target creature and opponent controls till end of turn. Untap that creature, gains haste until end of turn. I much prefer this one because snagging a key blocker, or snagging their big dude they just dropped is always to me more useful than some of the one-off effects like, 2/2 token, cool, awesome, whatever.
Yeah.
Weapon Surge. I got an Izzet card here. Single red, instant. Target creature you control gains +1/+0 and first strike till end of turn, or an overload for 1 and a red for each of your creatures. That to me is great. That will find a home in Boros easily. Gruul, I think, will happily take that. And Izzet obviously is always looking for extra punch, so I can't. It's not the best card in the world, but in Limited, people will lose their board to that card.
Yeah, it reminds me of Furious Resistance. Blocking creature gets +1, +3/+0 in first strike, but the fact that it doesn't have to be blocking, the fact you can overload it, it's a bit more powerful.
Yeah.
it's good against deadlocked boards. There's certain matchups that you'll just completely side it out against because it'll be useless. But
yeah,
I'll definitely play it at least to see how it feels in the format.
Nice. Battering Crisis. 2 and a green for a 2/1 trample with evolve. Yes, please.
Yep.
Simic has needed trample more often than it has gotten it.
And anytime something has like a low toughness or a adaptive snapjaw is so good because anything you play after him will likely evolve him, or in a 6/2 for that is great. Almost anything will evolve Battering Crisis, and he'll just be this big giant evolving fish beast.
Yeah, nice. He's great. I'm very happy with it. Crowl Warrior at the same cost for a 2/2, which you can pay 5 and a green to give him +3/+3 until end of turn.
So he's a bear.
He's a bear with a really difficult to get bonus, basically.
Well, it's a mana seed. Late game, when you have mana but nothing to do with it, it's something.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's useful, the only,
Well, any bonus is still a bonus.
Yeah.
Is the point. So if you need a 2-spot, he's a 2/2. He'll trade with Boros. He's a Blood Rush target. Eventually he can Blood Rush himself, sort of. So go for it. Why not?
Yep.
Maze Behemoth. 5 and a green for a 5/4 trample that gives your multicolored creatures trample. Probably pretty useful in Simic. There's a lot of multicolored stuff there I can see. Gruul, not so much, because I've noticed it tends to be not so multicolored focused right off the bat. Some of the really good ones are, but it's a lot of just straight green, red, quick rush. You're probably done by the time you're dropping a 5/4, and there's not much that's going to hit. Golgari, probably a few more gold targets on the board, but you either only have one big creature or a few decent creatures, so I don't know how much trample is going to help. So not very useful in my opinion. I mean, he's a 5/4 trample on his own. That's the only reason I would play him. I would not really worry about the multicolored effect.
Yeah.
Mending Touch. Get single green for an instant that regenerates target creature. Do not play this card because it implies that you're losing and you're only playing it to not lose.
A better card to have would be something that would be removal, would be another creature.
Anything that's more of a trick than just it's taken up a spot in your deck to save a card that obviously wasn't good enough to survive one more turn. Yeah, okay, it's possible you keep your win con on the board when they try and direct remove it, but short of that, I really just don't see any spot for this.
Yeah.
Maybe as a sideboard, as a late pick against an Orzhov deck or something or Dimir where you're dealing with a lot of removal, direct removal, maybe. Mutant's Prey, same cost, also an instant. Target creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it, fights target creature an opponent controls. Give me Pit Fight all day, every day over this card.
Well, I think it's targeted directly at Simic.
It's the only one that could probably play it.
Just because Gruul decks, don't deal with a lot of counters. If you have that nuts Simic deck with everything evolves, this is better than Pit Fight. And I think it's more... It's a little bit more relevant than Pit Fight just because you probably won't see Pit Fight in the pre-release. But when you're drafting all 3 sets, you're going to see Pit Fight, you're going to see this.
You will play this if you're in Simic.
Yeah.
And that is the only place you will play.
Yeah.
But then it's good then, so... next is Phyto Burst. It's 1 and a green for a sorcery that gives target creature +5/+5 till end of turn. I mean, if you're in Gruul, if you're in Simic, yes, you're going to play it. Golgari even gives it some oomph. The fact that it's not an instant speed makes me a little sad. I'd rather have back Titanic Growth, get +4/+4 that I can use as a block trick.
Yeah.
But, if you're going all in on the offensive, it fits. I could see this being pretty nasty, actually, if you're doing like a Jund thing. Rakdos, Gruul combo. This could fit that well because you're going to give your tinier guys from earlier in the game, a big butt for one turn. So I'll play it, I'm sure. It's just that instant speed to me makes it a whole lot less playable all around.
Yep.
Renegade Crisis, single colorless, 2 green for a 3/2. With evolve, and whenever it evolves, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control with a counter already on it. I mean, if this goes off in the right Simic deck, you win.
Yeah, even as its body, if it's just a 3/2 evolve for 3, like that's highly playable. But the fact in the Simic deck that it's just everything's increasing and it's pretty crazy.
Well, and him a little bit later is actually not a problem because he's going to keep things evolving that have stopped evolving on their own.
Yeah, and he keeps he pairs well with things that don't even have evolve. Like if you have an Ivy-laden Denizen and you're using that Denizen to put counters on other things.
Yeah.
He has synergy with Forced Adaptation, with Burst of Strength.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to put counters on things in Return to Ravnica block limited.
Yeah.
That I think he's gonna create some interesting interactions.
Yeah. Probably not playable outside of it, but he'll be a bomb in it.
Yeah. Absolutely, and limited.
Yep. Ceruli Gatekeepers, last Gatekeeper of the set, 3 and a green. Gives you a 2/4. If you hold 2 gates, you get 7 life. Life gain is always one of the stupidest abilities, so this is probably the worst of all of them. You don't get a creature, you don't gain control of something, you don't draw a card, you don't kill something with -2/2. This is just
if this was a 4 mana 2/4 that you just gain 7 life when it entered the battlefield, it would be amazing. It would see standard play. That's why we see things like Thragtusk, like Centaur Healer.
Yep.
The fact that it's so conditional and you usually won't trigger it by itself.
Yeah, give me a Centaur Healer any day of the week over this.
Absolutely.
After this, we got Skylasher, 2/2 with Flash for 1 and a green. Cannot be countered and has reach and protection from blue. I don't know. I'd almost rather it wasn't so cheap, to be honest. I'd rather it was a 2/3 for 3 with Flash, can't be countered. I mean, something that's got a butt that's going to survive more than one turn. To me, you're going to end up trading this with something as trick removal.
Yeah, and for 2, that's not bad. I will play it because it's a Flash bear. It's amazing.
It's a bear with a whole lot of bonus.
The fact that it's red, or rare, not red. The fact that it's rare means that they try to bump the power level up, past a normal bear.
To me, though, its abilities are only uncommonly good or useful.
It's designed to block flyers, blue flyers.
But if I'm spending 2 to basically just trick remove something.
Well, it's not even trick remove, it's trick block. You do it on their turn.
Well, I mean, the fact that it does have protection from blue, though, as blockers, I mean, that's half of the flyers you pretty much just stopped and you don't have to trade. So, it's good, and I will definitely take it because it fits in a lot of the decks I want to play. But, it's a good utility card.
But that's it.
Yeah.
It's not amazing by any stretch.
Last up in green is Thrashing Moss Dog, which is 3 and a green for a 3/3 with reach, and has Scavenge for 4 and 2 green. One of the more playable Golgari cards, I think. Decent power, it fits in the curve nicely, and reach is a useful ability. Counter Azorius and Selesnya too with Populate. Beyond that, you're still gonna have to play Golgari. If you really want to do the whole scavenge thing a whole lot. So to me, I would take it because it's a good butt with reach at 4-drop, and I can splash it. So scavenge to me is just an incidental bonus. And
yeah, scavenge is interesting because usually what I try to think of it is it's that late game when you're when you're drawing land and you have nothing else to do. It makes your creatures giant, but unfortunately, it's not quick enough when compared to some of the other mechanics. So Golgari just didn't do as well as some of the other guilds.
Yeah.
In limited, it'll be interesting to see when paired with other guilds like Selesnya or like Rakdos or like Gruul or whatever.
Yeah.
I feel it'll be a better support guild than it was a mono guild by itself.
Yeah, seeing that with Gruul and stuff could be interesting.
Yeah.
For now, we're going to basically skip all the coloreds and the split cards, and we'll do them in our next post because there's probably going to be a lot more to talk about there. So look for that in the next day or two after this guy. We'll just jump to the artifacts. You can just kind of cover 10 of them all at once. They're the Clue Stones. Cost 3 colorless. You tap to add 1 of the 2 guild colors to your mana pool, and you can pay 1 of each of the guild colors. Tap it, sack it to draw a card. Card draw is useful. Mana acceleration and fixing is always useful. So yes, I will pick these highly pretty much every time, especially with the chance of going to 3-color decks, maybe even 4-color decks more consistently. These would be really awesome if you didn't have to tap them to sacrifice them, because then you could use its own mana ability to itself. But either way,
they'd be
really
more highly playable. I think there are certain guilds like Rakdos and Boros and maybe Gruul that you're a little less likely to play them unless your curve is high.
Or again, you're fixing for that third.
But if you have a Boros or Rakdos deck that's just nuts and it's just full of 2-drops,
yeah, Rakdos don't need no help.
Then this might clutter your deck. But this does, I think, because the 3 sets are going to be drafted together. You're more likely to be in 3 or 4 colors, and you'll need these. You'll need the key runes. You'll need the guild gates because that'll enable you to have pretty excellent multicolored decks.
Yeah. So I mean, these will be extremely useful. They're obviously at common, not supposed to be as useful as the key runes, but in conjunction with them, it just makes the set more playable. Given the fact that you are going to be playing so much multicolored, and you're going to be reaching more for your mana base. So
yeah,
I appreciate the thought.
As far as lands go, all the guild gates were reprinted, and by that I mean that they actually went with an expanded art. The guild gates from before were closer. They basically took the art from further away, reprinted them, so all 10 guild gates are back. The dual lands, or what they're called shock lands, those were not reprinted, but they will show up in the booster packs. They'll just have the Gate Crasher Return to Ravnica symbols on them.
Yep.
And they'll be in the normal land place where it'll be a land or a guild gate.
Yeah, that's one thing. There will be no basic lands in booster packs in this set. They will all either be a guild gate or
shock lands or the new mythic land, Maze's End. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can use it to add mini mana to your mana pool. You pay 3, return it to your hand after tapping it, search your library for a gate card, put it on the battlefield, and shuffle your library.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really underwhelming mythic. It's not going to see play in constructed.
The only reason it's mythic is because it's a guaranteed win con.
Right.
But the problem is it's now interestingly though, it's not legendary, which is the only reason it's even playable to me in the most obscure mana fetch, mana fixing deck is the fact that you could play multiples of these. And so you can start to combo 2 or 3 at a time. If that starts happening with a good mana base, yeah, you could win in 3 turns.
My only problem is even in that case, I don't think this will see Travis Wu, who's a professional that is known for making crazy decks.
Yeah.
I don't even think he can make this work because it doesn't combo with the shock lands. The shock lands can be fetched by Farseek, and if they could combo, if Maze's End somehow worked with the shock lands, then I think they could get it to work. Unfortunately, it's too slow with the guild gates.
Yeah, you died to Boros 7 times over before this even has a chance.
In constructed, by the time you would even get this off, you could have already won by omnisciencing, Enter the Infinite, dropping Borborygmos, and throwing lands at your opponent.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many other win conditions that unfortunately I don't think this is. So from a flavor perspective, I know why it exists. Unfortunately, it's an underwhelming card.
It's kind of like Trait Doctoring. It's one of those cards that's you're happy it's rare, so you won't crack it that often.
I do think that I think that there are corner cases in which you could draft and play this in your draft deck. And by that I mean that if you have enough acceleration or if you're spread across 4 colors, this card just enables you to get there easily.
No, but you gotta remember in draft, you'd have to have 1 of each guild.
No. I'm not saying for the win condition. I'm saying for putting the gate into play. You search your deck for a gate and put it into play. You wouldn't get the win condition off in limited. I'm just saying that it's slightly useful enough that you might still play it in a limited deck if you're playing 3 or 4 colors.
To me, the fact that the ability that it overrode the enters the battlefield tapped for the gate.
Yeah.
Like so it enters the battlefield, untap it.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yes, but then to sink 3 mana to fetch 1 land, it's just one of those things. You're probably already dead. Like if that's what you're having to do, late game fine, but late game, I don't know. Like I said, it can find a home. Absolutely, it's just
it'll get played.
I'll play it because I cracked it. Damn it, and that's the only damn reason I'm going to play it. It's because it was last pack, last pick, and ended up in my hand. Well, in that case,
When if you're playing other things like the Key Runes or the Clue Stones, Verdant Haven, there are enough mana accelerants that you can still play it on turn 3, use its ability, and still play other things usually.
Yep.
But again, that's going to be a corner case, and that is literally the only time it'll ever see play is when you're playing those decks where you're stretched across colors. So.
Anyway, on to the really fun cards, which will be, again, the gold. There are no hybrid in this set, if I'm not mistaken. So it's all gold or split cards for Gatecrash. Or not Gatecrash, Dragon's Maze.
Yeah.
So we will review those next and do all the funsy things that are there. So check back in the next day or two, and we'll have some goodies for you.
Thanks.
See ya.